is diet and diabetes, knowing more about carbohydrates, basically what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat. So people have been asking for a session just on diet and food for some time, and I'm very pleased that we're going to be able to allow you to listen to our speaker. Just to remind you, this Sunday, the 29th of September, we have the Evington Mela, and those of you who want to have a free diabetes test can go down there and see our people at the Mela. The Mobile Diabetes Unit will be there. We are very delighted to have as our guest speaker today, Anis Leblanc, who is joining us from Paris in France and is a skilled and motivated dietitian with a dynamic background both in clinical settings and in the food industry. With over 2 years of experience working in various medical specializations, such as oncology, gastroenterology, and surgery, she has been able, through her work, to remind us about the importance of what we eat, especially for those of us who are diabetics. She's currently pursuing a master's degree in product innovation at the ICN Business School in Paris, but her main passion and interest is diabetes. So we go over from Leicester to Paris to speak to and hear from Anis Leblanc. Thank you for joining us, Anis. This is your first visit to the Chai Chat. We are delighted to see you, and you have about 15 minutes, and then I'm sure people have questions about what they're going to be eating for their supper tonight. But in the meantime, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me today. Like Keith just said, my name is Anaïs. I'm a dietitian, and I'm just going to share my screen with you to do my little presentation about diet and diabetes. Just give me 1 second. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Do you see yourselves as well, or should I move this here? Is it better? Okay. So, welcome to this talk about diet and diabetes. I just want to give you a brief idea of understanding a bit more about carbohydrates, which is the main thing we are going to talk about today. Little outline of how I'm going to present it. So just a little introduction of myself. What is diabetes? I'm sure you all know already what is diabetes, and just the impact of carbohydrates on your blood glucose and how to use your diet to help you manage your diabetes and your blood glucose. And I hope you will go home, end this session with a few tips to remember on what to do with your diet and diabetes. So Keith already talked about me, so I don't need to go over this again. But yes, I'm a dietitian in the UK. I've been working for the NHS for about 2 years. I did a bit of clinic and a bit of acute work. And I'm now doing my master's in Paris. And I'm really happy to be here today to talk about diabetes with you. So I think you all already know what is diabetes, but just a quick little overview on that. So there's 2 main types of diabetes, type 1 diabetes and type 2. Type 1 is an autoimmune where your pancreas is not producing any insulin. So then you would need to have insulin injection to help your body to metabolize glucose. And type 2 diabetes often happen because of lifestyle, diet. It can be a genetic factor. It can be also aging or being overweight. And not everyone with type 2 diabetes will need to be on insulin. So it's 2 different pictures here, but the management is quite similar for both, except from the insulin injections. So this is just about diabetes. And the main thing I will be talking about today is carbohydrates. So I guess a lot of you already know what are carbohydrates, but it's important to know that carbohydrates have a direct impact on your blood glucose level. Whether you have diabetes or not, everyone will have raised blood glucose levels after eating carbohydrates. So carbohydrate is a group of nutrients. It's a macronutrient. There are 2 main types. So the starchy carbohydrates, which is the bread, the pasta, chapati, rice, potatoes, oats, all of those are starchy carbohydrates, which are digested a certain way. And the non-starchy carbohydrate, which would be your fruits, your sweets, your honey syrups, soda, juices, and all of those. But all carbohydrates will increase your blood sugar level. So this is why it's really important to know about it. So I don't want to go deep into the science, but just to give you a little overview of how your body is digesting it, it's going to be important to explain you why you need to make a change or not in your diet. So, for example, here we see someone is eating a banana or a naan bread. This will cause the food to go in your stomach and be broken down into glucose and raise your blood glucose level. So this is whether you have diabetes or not, you're eating carbohydrates, your blood glucose goes up. With someone who doesn't have diabetes, you will release insulin, which will allow the glucose to be absorbed into your cells and produce energy. This is what happens when you eat carbohydrates. But when you do have type 2 diabetes, for example, here you're eating an apple, it will be broken down, your blood sugar will go up, but your pancreas will not be producing enough insulin. So then you will end up with high blood glucose levels and not enough insulin to allow you to process that glucose to use as energy. Or other people that have type 2 diabetes become insulin resistant. I know we hear this a lot, is when you do produce the insulin, but your body is not reacting to it anymore. Meaning that you do have the insulin, but you're not allowing this glucose to enter your body, your cells, to become energy. So this is what happens in type 2 diabetes. And in type 1 diabetes, again, you're going to eat some sort of carbohydrate, you will have a high blood glucose level, but you will not produce any insulin at all. So you will end up with high blood glucose levels. And this is why you will need, when you have type 1 diabetes, to have an insulin injection. It's really important. And what happens, we are talking of high blood glucose, why we don't want to have high blood glucose constantly is, first of all, if the glucose stays in your bloodstream and is not absorbed in your cell, you're going to damage your blood vessels, and it can end up in a lot of different complications. And also in type 2 diabetes, for example, if you constantly have this blood glucose flowing and you're not absorbing it, you're making your liver produce and try to release more and more insulin, which is also damaging this organ. This is why we want to avoid having this constant blood glucose, which is not being absorbed into your cells thanks to the insulin. So this is just to explain you a bit how your body is processing the glucose. And like we were talking about earlier, you're eating your carbohydrate, can be your bread, your roti, it can be a dessert, it can be a piece of fruit. What happens when you're eating it, especially if you eat it by itself, you will have a high peak of insulin, blood glucose, sorry, and then a big drop as well. So you might go into hyperglycemia, so you have too much sugar into your blood, and then it will drop very quickly because it's very quickly digested. It will drop very quickly into hypoglycemia. So this is something as well. We don't want to go all day going up and down each time we eat carbohydrates. This is why, again, it's really important to know about this, to know how to eat later on, to avoid having this constant blood glucose peak and hypoglycemia. And when you have this as well, you're creating a craving. When it goes up, like you can see here, you have high blood glucose, and the moment that it goes back down, very often you will feel quite tired and you will be craving something sweet or another carbohydrate again, and you're constantly having this throughout the day, which is what we want to avoid when you have diabetes. So here again, so let's talk about carbohydrates. Let's talk about the different types of carbohydrates. So not all carbohydrates are the same. So here we have a simple, what we call refined carbohydrates, which is white bread, white pasta, your biscuits, cakes, chocolate, breakfast cereals. It can be the energy drink. It can be fizzy drinks as well. All of those foods are called refined or simple carbohydrates. And they all have one thing in common, which is they are very easily digested by your body. So you will have them, and very quickly, because they are very simple to digest, very easy to digest for your stomach, you're breaking it down into glucose and it directly into your blood, causing this high spike that we talked about earlier. So these carbohydrates, the simple refined carbohydrates, are easy to digest and go really quickly into your bloodstream. And then we have something called the more complex carbohydrates, which are brown bread, seeded bread, whole grain, wholemeal pasta, fruits and vegetables, oats, for example, sweet potatoes. And all of these foods have something in common. They have a lower glycemic index. So the glycemic index is your ability, if you want, to digest and process it quickly or not, and what is the effect it will have on your blood glucose level. And these foods that I just talked about, they are higher in fiber. And fiber is a bit more difficult for your body to digest and to break it down. That's why it's more interesting to eat those carbohydrates rather than the simple ones, because they are digested quite differently, or at least in a different pace. So when you will ingest some complex carbohydrates, it will stay longer in your stomach because your body needs to break it down a bit more than the simple refined carbohydrates. And this leads, instead of being directly into your blood and having a high blood glucose, it will take time and it will be gradually released into your blood. And you can see the little curve here on the bottom left of my screen. You will see that the spike is more steady and it will be on a longer period of time. So this, it's not only helping you to not go too high into the blood glucose and then a big drop, but it's allowing you to go for a longer period as well on a more steady, less high peak of blood glucose. And this is what we want to achieve here. And this, not only it doesn't go so high, but also it helps you feel full for longer because your stomach is not emptying so quickly because of the fiber. It stays longer in your stomach and you're not going to feel hungry 1 hour after eating it. It's going to stay longer. So this is something that we want to achieve when we have diabetes, is this curve rather than the really high and then really low curve. Okay, another way to help you with your carbohydrates, with your blood glucose management, is to pair your carbohydrates with other groups of food. So if you're eating the carbohydrates alone, again, whether they are complex or simple carbohydrates, you're eating it alone and it's pure food that is going to be broken down into glucose. So again, it will go in your blood and you will have blood glucose levels raising. But when you have your carbohydrates along with other group of food, for example, protein, which can be your chicken, it can be fish, it can be eggs, or it can be even like vegetarian options like tofu. I don't know if you eat anything like that. So pairing your carbohydrates with your protein or with your fiber, which are your vegetables or fruits, or with dairy products, for example, pairing all of these foods together again, it takes more time for your stomach to digest a whole meal than the carbohydrates alone. So again, what this is going to do is going to make that curve quite steady and it doesn't go so high and then so low again. So the ideal way, I would say, to eat your carbohydrates is to pair it with other group of food. Don't have it by itself. So you have your carbohydrates, like a normal meal, I would say, like your carbohydrates with your source of protein, your source of fiber, maybe some dairy products or some healthy fats, maybe some olive oil. So this is the best way really to eat the carbohydrates. And I gave a little example here. For example, here it's a chapati, for example, or a roti. Instead of eating the roti alone, you will eat it, you will digest it quite quickly, and you will be hungry in 1 hour, and you will make your blood glucose go up. Try to have this with your chicken curry, for example. So you have protein here with the chicken. Maybe you put coconut milk or ghee or oil inside. Maybe you put vegetables inside. And all of this together will help slow your gastric emptying, your stomach emptying, and make this curve much more steady than having the chapati by itself. And earlier I was talking about the simple carbohydrates. I don't want you to not eat simple carbohydrate. It doesn't mean that you should ban this food from your diet, but it's just something that if you eat it, it will go much quicker into your blood and raise your blood glucose much quicker. So the best moment to eat this type of carbohydrate, with desserts, the syrups, or everything that is very sweet or very easy to digest, like I just told you, is to have it after your main meal. So then your stomach is already filled with the protein, with the fiber, with the healthy fats, the dairy product. And then when you add the dessert on it, it doesn't go straight in your stomach and straight into your blood. It will be, again, more steady. So the best moment really to eat the sweet foods and all of that is to eat it after your main meal rather than on an empty stomach. I know that a lot of people like to have it for breakfast. They will start with maybe a white piece of bread, or they will start with some sweet breakfast cereals, or maybe some biscuits or some cakes. It's really avoiding to do that and save this for after your main meal. So my top tips to remember really is controlling your portion of carbohydrates. So have it along with other groups of food. Prioritizing complex carbohydrates like we just talked about. So all the whole grains, all the whole meal, the seeded bread, the vegetables, sweet potatoes, oats, all of those carbohydrates that are a bit more complex to digest, to break down, and reducing the simple carbohydrates, which would be the white bread, the Kit Kat, the chocolates, the syrups, and the white pasta and all of that. Reducing this and increasing more the complex carbohydrates. And then to avoid this blood glucose peak again, like we just talked about, make sure you have your carbohydrates with other group of food to have less of a blood sugar spike, and make sure this curve is steady. And again, the best moment to have your sweet food is after a nourishing meal. And I know that it sounds very basic to say that, but a healthy, balanced diet usually is really important when you have diabetes. It's not only about the carbohydrates, but it's also making sure you do have enough protein, you do have enough healthy fats, you do have maybe some dairy products, and you do have a good amount of vegetables in your diet as well. Are you practicing a bit of physical activity, for example? So all of that, it also plays a big role into the management of diabetes. So it's just something to keep in a corner of your mind as well. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm happy to hear if you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Shanice LeBlanc. Thank you for that very clear and very concise presentation, which actually was very helpful in deciding on what we should eat. Because as you say, whether you're diabetic or non-diabetic, you eat most of these foods and it'll give everyone a spike. Let me tell you about my problem, because we actually come here and we ask our problems. it's such a nice little chai chat, because we can come up with our problems. Last week, I did something very interesting. I was invited to a friend's house, and he gave me he and his wife gave me my usual favorite dish, which was a potato curry and puris. The next day, I went out and had a mac and cheese, big size, not the small size. My body has not recovered from that yet. I was very good with my Freestyle Libre. I was in the box. I was coasting at 7 and roughly 50 mmOLs. And suddenly, after those 2 meals, even a week later, I've still not come down. I've come down to 8, but anything I eat now, I'm shooting up again. Was it the combination of, is it just with carbohydrates like potatoes? It's difficult to get them out of your system. Why is it taking so long to break down the potatoes and the macaroni in my system?
Are you type 1 or type 2 diabetic?
I'm a type
Okay.
2 diabetic.
Yeah. So I think, so first of all, it's okay to have some food you really want sometimes, you have to enjoy your food. But it's true that potatoes and you say puri are two carbohydrates by themselves, right? With no protein, for example, in them. So it's a huge amount of carbohydrates for your body. Are you on insulin by any chance? No. Okay. So yeah. So
I'm on metformin. Yeah.
okay, metformin. So here, it's very hard for your body to process that you're not on insulin as well, because it's a lot of carbohydrates. And here you're on metformin, which helps to reduce the blood glucose, right? But your pancreas also has to kind of fight here to produce a bit more of insulin to be able to process this big amount of carbohydrates all at once.
Mm.
And also, you might be also insulin resistant, meaning that even when you're producing all of that insulin, is your body actually responding to it? So maybe here your pancreas is fighting to produce that much insulin, but it doesn't do anything because of insulin resistance, which sometimes happen.
Sure. Now, today I went shopping in IKEA to buy something, and I was tempted by the IKEA chips. I didn't have the meatballs, I just had the chips. Again, spiking immediately, but then a dramatic fall. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like last week with my potato curry, my mac and cheese. This was just ongoing. It came down very fast.
Yes.
Why is that? Why is that with potatoes fried, they were different to the ones that were put in a curry? The same food, but it had a different effect.
I think it's not only about the fact that it was fried or not, but also because it depends what did you eat. For example, before you had that potato curry, it depends if you had maybe a bit of alcohol along with that. It really depends on a lot of things. Here you had on an empty stomach pure potatoes, right? And then it created a spike, because potatoes are really easy. It's a very simple carbohydrate. So it really gets broken down so quickly into your blood. Blood glucose go up really quickly because it's digested very easily by our body. And then once that it shoots so high, it's also really easy to bring it back down. And then you're creating that drop. So sometimes you can feel even really tired after having that sudden drop of blood glucose. So I think it's, if you ate the meatballs and the fries, the chips, you might not have that massive spike and then drop. It was just carbohydrates.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good. Any questions? It's very difficult to take questions from people who are watching us on the YouTube channel. I know a lot of people are just watching us on the streaming channel. But so we can't take the questions. You can send in an email if you want to ask a question in advance. But I think that it's difficult. So this is only for people who are actually on the Zoom meeting who can ask questions at the moment. Any questions from people on the Zoom meeting before we proceed?
Can I just quickly ask something?
Of course.
Yeah.
Can you tell us your name?
This is Nasreen.
Nasreen. Yes,
yeah,
Nasreen.
yeah. Thank you very much. It was really good, and it's good to know that we can have carbs because I've stopped completely.
Okay.
But what I wanted to ask was how to stop the sugar craving, especially when I want to have a cup of tea. I have to have something sweet. So what should I do?
It's very difficult, and I hear a lot of people saying that. And it's not actually your fault for having sugar craving, because our body, our tongue, gets so easily used to sugar. And for example, I take my dad, I don't know if he's watching, but he was raised having a lot of sugar in his cup of tea. And until now, it's very hard for him not to put sugar in his cup of tea because his body is used to it. So even if I would put 1 spoon, I don't even put anymore, but if you put 1 spoon, it's sweet enough. But for him, 1 spoon of sugar doesn't taste like anything because he's used to maybe 3 spoons of sugar. And your tongue really gets used to it. And the more you give it to your body, the more it's going to crave. So it's not really your fault for craving sugar if you were used to sugar before. And one thing that is very difficult is getting rid of that craving. But first of all, it's a bit of difficult effort in the beginning because you will crave, but you will have to try to resist this sugar craving. And also, some people find that on the everyday basis, having a more like nourishing, high fiber, high protein diet will help to reduce this sugar craving. Often the craving happen as well when Keith was explaining that he had the potatoes, the fries, the chips. It goes really up, you're fine. The moment it reaches that bottom peak, you will crave sugar often because your body doesn't have enough. It's in hypoglycemia. So in this moment, you're going to crave. So what is the best thing to do is avoid having this and try to have this curve all the time to avoid having that craving. So introducing more fiber in your diet in the everyday life, introducing maybe a bit more protein in your diet in the everyday life might help you reduce that craving. But I have to say, getting rid of a sugar craving is very difficult. So it's a little bit of effort to do in the beginning, I would say. But once you're used to it, it will be fine.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question. I know it's very hard.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've had a question coming in on the emails about walking and exercise. How soon after you eat should you start moving? Because there is a theory that if you eat and then you get the muscles moving in your legs in particular, not the other muscles, not sort of waving your hands about, but the leg muscles, this will actually bring down your sugar levels. Question that's come in there from Birmingham.
I think in type 2, in diabetes in general, you have to be careful because your body is not able to regulate by itself. I would say for a person who doesn't have diabetes, it would be okay to exercise. For other people, I would say right after eating would maybe not be the best moment because this glucose is still circulating in your blood, right? So I would say maybe try to wait 2-3 hours maybe and then try to exercise. But if you're really unsure, always ask your GP. I know we say that a lot, but it's really important to talk to your GP if you feel like something is going wrong. If you have very regular hypo, for example, go to your GP.
Okay, well, the questioner heard that answer, so that's very helpful. Any more questions to Anis before we release her into the streets of Paris and come back to the UK? Anis, thank you so much for joining us. It would be very helpful, as always, if we could have your slides, and we will circulate them to members of the team by email so they can all have the opportunity of having a look at your slides. Perfect. I think what we eat is extremely important, and what you've said has been very helpful. Thank you. You're welcome to stay. We've now got some news headlines on diabetes. We tried to keep this chai chat very short, so 30 minutes, so you did very well. Let's go over from Paris in France, thanking Anis again for her wonderful presentation, to Hounslow, the Paris of West London, Hounslow in Middlesex. And I think Dr. Steffi is there to tell us about the headlines, the diabetes headlines of the week. Dr. Steffi Rodriguez.
Thank you, Kidsa, and hello, everybody. Today's news headline. The first news, 3 cups of this 4P drink daily could slash diabetes, heart disease, and stroke risk. A new study has suggested that regularly drinking coffee could protect against developing multiple cardiometabolic diseases, including type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, and stroke. In the study of more than 170,000 people, those who regularly consume this drink can had an up to 48.1% reduced risk of cardiometabolic disease. The second news, fast onset of type 2 diabetes triggered by exposure to arsenic. The individuals frequently exposed to arsenic are at risk of developing type 2 diabetes 65 months earlier than those rarely exposed, the study has reported. The participants with higher levels of arsenic, selenium, copper, molybdenum, nickel, or tin in their urine saw their blood sugar rise at a faster pace than those with lower levels, according to the results. The third news: beetroot and oats to protect your heart. Whole grain cereals like oats, wheat, and barley contain a special sticky fiber called beta-glucans. Studies show that these binds to cholesterol in the gut, drawing some of it out of the body. Beetroot juice has also been reported to lower blood pressure due to high levels of a natural plant substance called nitrates, which is found in some of the root vegetables. That's all for today's news, and good evening to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Steffi. From Hounslow, we come back to Leicester. To remind you all, if you live in or near Evington, then join us at the Evington Mellah on Evington Green. Rajiv, what are the times of the Evington Mellah?
10:30 to 5.
10:30 to 5. And when will the mobile diabetes unit be there?
9:30.
9:30. Oh, as early as that. He's trying to impress us. So if you want a diabetes test, obviously you can go there. I hope the flooding won't continue in Leicester. It was cancelled last week, by the way, because of the flooding. Why don't you pop down there and have a quick test and get one of our new T-shirts? We've got a Silver Star T-shirt, which you can get as well. So thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you to Anis LeBlanc, to Rajiv and the Silver Star team, to Dr. Steffi from Hounslow and her news headlines. We will see you all again next week, if not on Sunday. Thank you and good evening.